Little Creep, and welcome to my Trick or Treat, the show that's just like me, a little short. Today, we're going to be talking about the 1981 cult classic, Blood Beach. A pleasant little story about a man eating beach.
Wait, hold on a second. This movie is about a beach that eats people?
Well, technically, it's about a flesh-eating monster that lives under the beach.
Oh, well, that's still pretty original.
Yes, it's a very unique horror movie.
Sure, I'd say so.
Sometimes you take a trip to the beach, but in this, the beach trip takes you.
That sounds like a Yakov Smirnoff joke. In Soviet Russia, beach trip takes you.
Despite the fact that this film is more of a crime drama and was criticized for being boring and not nearly as gory as it was advertised to be, the VHS tape is still a highly sought-after cassette. It was released on VHS by Media Home Entertainment in 1981, and this would be the only time it was released on VHS, adding to its rarity and mystique. So if you have this tape, consider yourself lucky. Well, thank you for watching Little Creeps Trick or Treat, and have a spooktacular Halloween. Stay safe and stay scary. And now for our feature presentation.
Oh, hey, greetings, mates. I'm just getting the old VHS pirate ship all souped up for Halloween. It's gotta be really scary. Gotta be really spooktacular.
Did someone say spooktacular?
Oh, hey, little creep.
Greetings. What are you doing?
Well, I'm just getting the old VHS pirate ship all ready for Halloween.
It looks great. The fake cobwebs look very realistic.
Oh, yeah, those cobwebs are fake. That's what that is. Yeah, totally. Hey, you know, decorating for Halloween is something the whole family can enjoy, much like watching scary movies.
You watch horror movies with your kids? That's sick.
No, not horror movies. Scary movies. Family-friendly scary movies. Say, that reminds me. Let's take a look and see what today's episode is all about.
Today's adventure: family-friendly scary movies. It's possible to have a scare without blood and gore.
Mm-hmm. Yep, good, clean fun. So, get ready for today's adventure. Yo ho ho!
Time for the show.
Yar! Alright, calm down. Halloween, tied with Christmas on being the most popular holiday. There's all kinds of good times to be had, and people spend a shitload of money on it. And there's lots of traditions that go along with it. Carving pumpkins, going trick-or-treating, and the television Halloween specials. Halloween television specials don't really exist anymore, but back in the good old days, they were everywhere. Everything and everyone seemed to have a Halloween television special. Even Paul Lynde with the Paul Lynde Halloween Special, which first aired in 1976 on ABC. And this had a number of guest stars, including Kiss. And it also featured Witchy Poo and the Wicked Witch of the West. And yes, that is Margaret Hamilton. This is tremendous. I mean, you're never going to see Kiss and the Wicked Witch of the West on the same screen together. This was a campy, kooky, mid-70s television riot. It was a pretty good time, but unfortunately, it was never released on VHS. It was released on DVD, but fuck DVDs. And then there was the Wonderful World of Disney's Halloween Hall of Fame special, which aired in 1977. It was hosted by Jonathan Winters and featured him as a pumpkin head with some very convincing makeup effects, and this is pretty terrifying, but it was great. Watching this as a kid really puts you in the Halloween spirit. And this featured a number of Disney Halloween-themed shorts, including the famous Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And this animated short is what really brought the Washington Irving story into the mainstream. This was a big deal. I remember watching this in school as a kid. Of course, that was before the commies took over and you could still have fun in school. Disney had a number of other Halloween specials, but the Halloween Hall of Fame is certainly the most famous. Now, this was never released on VHS, but yes, it was released on DVD, so at least it's not lost to time. Some of the animated shorts that were featured in this Halloween special were released on VHS, including The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which was released in 1982 as part of the Walt Disney Home Video Collection in the white clamshell. And you can find this today, but it's going to cost you around 30 buckaroonies. It was also released a few other times through the 90s, and you can find these rather easy today for around 10 bucks. And did you know that there was a Legend of Sleepy Hollow made-for-TV movie in 1980 that starred Jeff Goldblum? I didn't know that. Nobody talks about this one, but there might be a good reason for that. This was released on VHS in 1985 and is pretty easy to find and cheap. As I had mentioned earlier, there were a shitload of Halloween specials and everything seemed to have one. But there were only a select few that they aired annually that you just did not want to miss. One of them being Garfield's Halloween Adventure, which first aired in 1985 on CBS, which continued to air all through the rest of the 80s. But now it seems to be kind of forgotten about. This was great, and I loved watching this as a kid. Wait, is that a Halloween 3 reference? I loved this Halloween special, and Garfield could do no wrong in my eyes. This was released on VHS, however, this is really hard to find nowadays. Why is that? Well, I really don't know. But I can tell you that the Garfield Christmas Special VHS goes for an outrageous price. 70 bucks. Holy shit. Even the Garfield Thanksgiving Special goes for pretty mid-tier prices. Why is that? I don't know. I guess everybody just loves Garfield. Now, that's just what people are trying to sell them for. It doesn't really mean much, and they can try all they want. And I was able to find a copy of the Christmas special for around 10 bucks. But we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about Halloween. All right. Jeez, how dramatic can you get? Anyways, the most famous Halloween special would have to be It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, which originally aired in 1966 and has been a Halloween staple ever since. Yeah, this still gets played on television nowadays, and it was released on VHS multiple times. And all these distributions are relatively easy to find today and pretty cheap. And this was paired up with the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving special and sold as a box set. So Halloween specials are just one of the many Halloween traditions. Another tradition is watching horror movies. But if you're a kid or have kids, this would be a terrible idea. So what sorts of movies could you watch with your kids that are just scary enough to put them in the Halloween spirit and not require therapy? Well, today we're going to explore some scary movies that the whole family can enjoy in today's episode, Family Friendly Scary Movies. So, the line between family movies and horror movies is very broad and thick. And as you can see from my diagram, that I don't know how to make diagrams. But this line is very wide indeed between the two film genres. So much so that you could do a little tap dance on it, and some movies have done said dance. The best example of this would have to be Beetlejuice, which was released in theaters March 30th, 1988. And it was a movie that seemed to come out of nowhere and was a huge hit. It was made for a budget of $15 million and took in $74 million at the box office. And this movie not only cemented the careers of Gina Davis, Alec Baldwin, and Winona Ryder, but also Michael Keaton, because it certainly wasn't Mr. Mom. And though you may scoff at the notion that Beetlejuice is a horror movie, it did win a Saturn Award for Best Horror Film in 1988. It does have lots of grim imagery, and the whole premise is grim. But there is a lighthearted fun hidden behind every scare. And this movie does have a unique take on the afterlife. Oh, for fuck's sakes. It's a social services office. That's scary enough. It also has the unique concept that if a ghost leaves the house that it's attached to, it ends up on Saturn and hunted by giant sandworms. And they never really explain this in the movie. It just happens. This movie has a lot going for it. It also brought new interest into the work of Harry Belafonte, who has 2 songs featured in the film. Beetlejuice is not only a great movie, but he's also a tremendously iconic character, for he is now one of the famous ghouls of the silver screen. And he was also an attraction at Universal Studios as part of a song and dance routine with the Universal Monsters called Beetlejuice's Graveyard Review. And this opened in 1992 and didn't stop running until 2015. So that just goes to show you how important Beetlejuice is. He's a part of pop culture. And of course, there were action figures for this. Action figures that are really fucking expensive nowadays. And Beetlejuice would have his own cartoon series, which aired September 9th, 1989 to December 6th, 1991. So this lasted a long time. I mean, having a show that runs for 2 years is like a millennia in the world of television. Make my millennia. This was released on VHS in multiple volumes that are pretty easy to find today, but do go for some pretty mid-tier prices. And the actual movie was released on VHS by Warner Brothers Home Video in 1988. And again in 1999, only this time it comes in a fucking kid's clamshell. I hate re-releases in kids' clamshells. But either way, both of these distributions are easy to find today and go for pretty reasonable prices. In fact, you can probably find both of these in a thrift store. Yeah, it's not a rare tape, but it certainly is a great movie. And it's the most famous example of a family-friendly scary movie. And everybody knows about this movie, but how about a family-friendly scary movie that's pretty much forgotten about? And I'm talking about High Spirits, which was released in theaters November 18th, 1988. And not only is this a tremendously underrated 80s movie, it is also an unsung Steve Guttenberg movie. Man, I never thought I would say that. You know, this show makes me say some weird shit. Yes, this of course starred the great Steve Guttenberg, but it also starred Daryl Hannah, Peter O'Toole, and Liam the Man Neeson. That's right, the man who would be Qui-Gon Jinn, one of the most interesting characters in The Phantom Menace, the other one being Darth Maul, and of course, since we like these characters, they fucking killed them because George Lucas fucking hates us, is in this movie. And this movie is a modern retelling of the classic haunted castle archetype. It's a comedy, but it does have lots of scary stuff and weird imagery. Now, I like this movie, but it doesn't seem like a lot of other people did. It was made on a budget of $17 million and only took in $8.5 million at the box office. So yeah, this was a stink bomb. The director Neil Jordan says that the film that was released is not the movie that he made, and that he wasn't even allowed to sit in on the editing process. So pretty much the producers screwed him. And he maintains that the original version of the film, which was way darker and contained more Liam Neeson, is locked away in a vault somewhere. Whether or not that's true, it's all part of the annals of history. That's annals of history. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the annals of history. Yes, it's all part of the annals of history. And High Spirits would go on to be released on VHS in 1989 by Media Home Entertainment. And this is sort of easy to find, and when you do find it, the price is fairly reasonable. If you haven't seen this movie, I recommend watching it at least once. And even though this isn't the version that was intended to be released, it's still pretty entertaining. And it does contain some scenes that might be inappropriate for your youngins, but they're easily avoided. Okay, so High Spirits is a severely underrated film, but how about a family-friendly scary movie that's not really underrated, but also isn't talked about nearly as much as it should be? And I'm talking about The Burbs, which was released in theaters February 17th, 1989. And it's a movie about life in the suburbs, living in a cul-de-sac next to a creepy house filled with even creepier neighbors. Creepy neighbors in which everyone on the block thinks are murderous ghouls, but then it turns out they're just being paranoid. But then it turns out they were right the whole time. This is not only a tremendous comedy, but also, at times, it's a pretty creepy movie. And the cast is pretty solid. You got Tom Hanks, Bruce Dern, Henry Gibson, Brother Theodore, Corey Feldman, and Carrie Fisher. And that's interesting because Carrie Fisher doesn't usually pop up in movies. I mean, once you've played Princess Leia, I guess you really don't have to do much else. This is one of my favorite movies, and it's neat because there's this underlying uneasy feeling through the whole movie. They did a great job mixing suspense with comedy, and there's lots of funny parts in this movie, as well as lots of creepy stuff, like the dream sequence. And I'm not gonna lie, that part really freaked me out when I was a kid. Hey, don't judge. I was 9 years old, okay? And this movie was a big hit. It was made with a budget of $18 million and took in 49 million buckaroonies at the box office. This movie really is probably the greatest family-friendly scary movie simply because it doesn't have anything gratuitous in it. There's no sex, there's no violence, there is just some creepy stuff, but it's fun for the whole family. And Brother Theodore is awesome in this. I mean, he is so creepy. What a ghoul. And if you're not familiar with him, he's done lots of dark stuff. He's been described as a combination of Boris Karloff, Salvador Dali, and Red Skelton, all rolled into one. He's done some voiceover work, like he was in the original Hobbit movie and The Last Unicorn, and he's no stranger to horror movies either, like he did the narration in Horror of the Blood Monsters, and he was in Nocturna, Granddaughter of Dracula. He's actually also considered a comedian, because he was known for these rambling stream of consciousness monologues that he called stand-up tragedy. What the hell was I talking about? Oh yes, The Burbs was released on VHS by MCA Home Video in 1989, and again in 1990. I'm not too sure why they did that, but I mean, it's like they just released it on VHS. Why release it again a year later? Oh, I don't know. It's their money. Anyways, it was released again in 1996, and these are relatively easy to find and pretty cheap, though the most common one you'll find is the 1990 distribution. And though I hate talking about DVDs on this show, but the DVD for The Burbs does contain the alternate ending, so that's pretty cool. So The Burbs is a great movie that isn't talked about as much as it should be, but how about another great movie that isn't talked about at all? And I'm talking about Haunted Honeymoon, which was released in theaters July 25th, 1986. And though this isn't really a horror movie, it's more of a murder mystery, and if you've seen this movie, then you know that things aren't exactly what they seem. And it's a pretty solid comedy that does contain some creepy and scary stuff, but once again, nothing gratuitous, so it's good for the whole family to watch. Though the plot does unravel fairly quickly, and sometimes it is hard to tell what's going on, this movie is enjoyable as long as you pay attention. One thing that's interesting about this movie is that it centers around a radio drama. Now, you more than likely will need to explain to your kids what a radio drama is. Yeah, that's pretty much a thing of the past. It's sort of like 10 years from now, if you were to show a teenager Chopping Mall, you would have to explain what the hell a mall is. This movie has a pretty great cast. It's got Gene Wilder, who not only stars in the movie, but he also wrote and directed it. This also stars Gilda Radner, and this marks her last appearance in a movie as she would pass away 3 years later from ovarian cancer. Well, that's fucking depressing. But have no fear, the great Dom DeLuise is in this movie. But not only that, he plays a woman, so he's in drag through the entire film, and it's hilarious. I mean, look at that. I can't even look at him. Yeah, I think this movie is pretty great, and it's certainly underrated, and lots of people don't even know about this movie nowadays. Well, it also seems like a lot of people didn't know about this movie when it was first released either. It was made with a budget of $9 million and only took in $8 million at the box office, so it didn't even make its budget. Wow. It would go on to be immortalized on home video. It was released on VHS in 1986 by HBO Video. Or is it HBO Canon Video? Or Canon HBO Video? Oh well, there's the VHS. And this is very easy to find today and very cheap. So what happens when you take all of the classic movie monster archetypes and put them together in an 80s movie? Well, you have a rip-roaring good time of monster mayhem.
Monster mayhem.
With one of the greatest 80s movies ever made, Monster Squad, which was released in theaters August 14th, 1987. And you might be surprised to learn that despite the fact that this movie is a cult classic now, it was a commercial failure when it was first released. It was made with a budget of $12 million, but only took in $3.8 million at the box office. But forget about all that shit, because this movie is awesome, and you don't even have to be a monster movie fan to enjoy this one. This certainly forms the trifecta of 1980s coming-of-age movies, the other ones being The Goonies and Stand By Me. In this one, 5 kids suddenly get caught up in fighting the classic monsters. And what's funny about this is they never really try to explain that. It just happens, and we just go with it because it's fucking entertaining. And they did a great job representing the classic monsters. There's the Gill Man, Dracula, the Wolfman, Frankenstein's monster, and the Mummy, though the Mummy doesn't really do anything except get destroyed. So there's that. And this movie has quite possibly the best Wolfman in any film I've seen. He's portrayed by John Grise, or is it Grease, or Griez, or whatever. Anyways, he plays the Wolfman, and he does a spectacular job, or should I say, spooktacular. Really bringing home the fact that the Wolfman does not want to be a monster, and it's a curse, and he's trying to die through the whole film. He doesn't want to be a Wolfman, man. His performance is tremendous, and I think this guy is one of the most underrated actors of all time. You 1980s heads might know him as Laszlo from Real Genius, while you millennials might know him as Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite. I mean, everything this guy does is great. You know, I just don't understand why this didn't do better at the box office. This movie is stupendous. Ah, well, what are you gonna do? It's got major fame nowadays, and the VHS is pretty hard to find and goes for pretty high prices. It was released on VHS by Vestron Video in 1988, and this is the only time it was released on VHS. So that definitely adds to the rarity of this tape. Now, yes, I consider this a family-friendly scary movie because, well, it's not too bad. There are some things that are downright scary, so you might want to use your own judgment when watching this with your kids. There's no sex scenes in this movie, so that's good, but there is blood and gore and scary shit. And it's worth mentioning that in 1976, there was a television show on NBC called The Monster Squad. Now, the movie is completely unrelated to the show, but this show is definitely ridiculous. It's a crime-fighting show where the classic monsters, well, fight crime. So, yeah, it's just as silly as it sounds. I mean, look at that. What the hell? Now, in this show's defense, it was never intended to be serious. It's a horror comedy, and definitely a good representation of the kookiness that came out of 1970s television. So, those are my main choices for family-friendly scary movies. But how about some
Honorable mentions?
Yes, honorable mentions. These are some family-friendly scary movies that for one reason or another didn't make the main list. The first one being Ghostbusters. Now, I would be a complete asshole if I made an episode about family-friendly scary movies and didn't include Ghostbusters. But you know, Ghostbusters deserves its own episode, and so I'll be talking about this in the future. Ghostbusters needs to be talked about at length, and not just briefly summed up as an afterthought. But it is a great movie to watch with your kids around Halloween or really any time of year. Next up would have to be Transylvania 65000, which was released in theaters November 8th, 1985. This is a monster movie spoof that stars Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis. This marks the second time I've talked about both of those actors today, and this didn't make the main list, mainly because even though it has a PG rating, there are a few things in this movie that aren't really appropriate for kids. And plus, this movie kind of stinks. So why am I even talking about this movie? Well, I don't fucking know. But either way, it was released a few times on VHS, and each of these distributions are pretty easy to find and very cheap, because it seems like nobody fucking wants this movie. Next on the list is
Ernest Scared Stupid.
And this didn't make the main list, mainly because, well, I already talked about this movie in part 2 of Exploring Ernest Tapes, which is in the archives if you want to check that out. And though in that episode I put Ernest Scared Stupid over pretty good, I have recently changed my mind about that film, and now I need to get serious here. What I'm about to tell you might upset you, it might shock you, it might anger you, but it has to be said. Ernest Scared Stupid is a terrible movie. Now hang on, folks. Calm down, everybody. Calm down. Let me explain. I know. People shouldn't say that, but it needs to be said. It's true. It's absolutely true. This movie is terrible. It's terrible. Okay, we're back. And I'm saying this as a complete and total Ernest fan, but Ernest Scared Stupid really sucks. Now, it's not as bad as the direct-to-video Ernest movies, but I'm telling you, it's pretty damn close. And when you compare Ernest Scared Stupid to the other real Ernest movies, I mean, it's not even a competition. Ernest Goes to Jail has to be the best one. And it's not that I'm expecting Dr. Zhivago when I watch an Ernest movie, but with Ernest Scared Stupid, they went full throttle with the kids' movie shit. The other Ernest movies are nowhere near as cheesy as this one is, and plus the other Ernest movies sort of seem like they were made for grown-ups, but kids could watch them too. But it seems like they made Ernest Scared Stupid strictly for kids. So if you're someone who says that Ernest Scared Stupid is your favorite Ernest movie, I encourage you to watch it again and see how you feel about that. But in its defense, it is a family-friendly scary movie, and plus it takes place on Halloween. So really, it's the perfect family-friendly scary movie to watch on Halloween. So there. Before we close out today's show, let me bring it back to television Halloween specials for a minute. There are plenty of Halloween specials that everyone remembers. The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, the Garfield Halloween Adventure, but there are some that it seems like a lot of people have forgotten about, like Raggedy Ann and Andy's The Pumpkin Who Couldn't Smile. I mean, of course it couldn't smile. It's a pumpkin. It would be more weird if it did smile. This premiered on CBS October 31st, 1979, and is produced by the great Chuck Jones. And yes, this was released on VHS. And then there's Halloween is Grinch Night, which premiered on ABC October 28th, 1977. And this is actually a prequel to How the Grinch Stole Christmas. So this was a prequel before prequels were en vogue. This was released on VHS in 1989 by Playhouse Home Video. And it was released again in 1992 by Random House Home Video, only this time its title was simply It's Grinch Night. I wonder why they dropped the Halloween. Not sure. And then it was released in 1996 by 20th Century Fox Home Video, and this time it's simply called Grinch Night. So little by little, we're losing parts of the title. And then there's The Halloween That Almost Wasn't, which premiered on ABC October 28th, 1979, and this starred Judd Hirsch as Dracula and Henry Gibson as Igor. And what's interesting about this is that when it was released on VHS, they changed the name to The Night Dracula Saved the World. Why didn't they just call it that from the beginning? I mean, that's an awesome title. You call your movie that, and I am most certainly watching it. And this VHS is sort of easy to find, though sometimes it does go for a high price. Along with Halloween television specials, there was also sitcom Halloween episodes. And the sitcoms that had the best Halloween episodes were Night Court and Roseanne. And of course, there's always the anticipated Treehouse of Horrors from The Simpsons. And these were released on VHS. I believe it was Socrates who once said, "You can judge a man by the company he keeps, and you can judge a sitcom by its Halloween episodes." Well, that's about it for today's adventure, and that's about it for Spooktacular October. Spooktacular! I hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I hope you've enjoyed the Spooktacular October trilogy. If you haven't seen the other 2 episodes yet, well, they're in the archives, and you should most certainly check them out. Be sure to hit subscribe and give a like, and I'll see you next time, only on Captain Adam's VHS pirate ship. Happy Halloween, mateys!